Welcome to Construction Genius. This is Eric Anderton. My guest today is Amy Marks. Amy is the head of Industrialized Construction Strategy and Evangelism at Autodesk. Before joining Autodesk, Amy was the CEO of Xsite Modular, and she has pioneered a path to becoming the world's preeminent prefabrication consultant. My conversation with Amy today is going to be extremely important for you because she is at the forefront of bringing prefabrication methods and philosophies into the construction industry. And we have a conversation that's really about change. Change is something that's very difficult for most contractors to embrace simply because change involves risk, risk involves money, and the whole point of being in business is to build a great company and make great money. So in order for change to happen, you must first be dissatisfied with where you are in your business, have a vision of where you could be, and then have some concrete first steps that you can take in order to overcome the resistance that you naturally have to change. And so in our discussion, we talk about why you should be dissatisfied with the current state of the construction industry. We cast a clear vision of how prefabrication can help you to overcome that dissatisfaction. We then talk about some first steps that you can take to embrace prefabrication and use it in your organization to increase the effectiveness, productivity, and profitability of the company. And all of this is designed to help you overcome some of the resistance you may be feeling to change. So go through this entire interview with that perspective in mind in terms of how change occurs. And we hit on it specifically at the end of our discussion. Amy is full of insights. She's full of passion. You're going to really enjoy this interview. And so dive into it with me. Take your time, listen through everything that we discuss, and I know that you'll get terrific value from our conversation. Thanks for listening today, and enjoy my discussion here with Amy. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Amy, welcome to Construction Genius. So great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You know, it's interesting. In my introduction, I was introducing you as the head of Industrialized Construction Strategy and Evangelism at Autodesk, but you're better known in the industry as the Queen of Prefab. How did you get that moniker?
Well, I've been in the industry a long time, and as you know, there probably aren't too many women that have been in the AEC industry with that moniker. I think I might be the first one, but it happened actually a long time ago. I think I was chairing a conference in Asia. And someone just introduced me like that, and it kind of stuck. And then I was an early adopter of LinkedIn. And so as people kept calling me that on LinkedIn, I just sort of embraced it, honestly, and started hashtagging Queen of Prefab. And that's literally how people started remembering me and recognizing me, aside from the fact that I think I'm one of the few women in the industry that maybe even probably the only one that talks about this. They just kind of stuck,
That's interesting. You had a company, Xsite Modular, for a number of years, and now you're at Autodesk. How did that transition happen there?
So, yeah, I actually, prior to even owning Xsite, I was a minority owner in a one-of-a-kind, very old modular manufacturer making steel and concrete modules. And also, we launched bathroom pods at that previous company prior to Xsite. So, I've been in this game for, at this point, almost 20 years as both a fabricator, and I ended up being the president of that company and then leaving because I felt like at that company, I was holding a hammer. So every problem I made looked like a nail, and I was solving it with the things that I knew how to make. And when I left over 10 years ago now to start Xsite, we started actually as prefabrication consultants. And that was a phrase that didn't even exist in anyone's vernacular. So I remember showing up at a lot of jobs and people asking me, what do you do? Like, wait, you're not the architect of record? What? I don't understand. You're the engineer? Oh, you're a fabricator? And I said, no, I'm not a fabricator. Well, explain it to me. And so really, I've been honestly blessed to travel the world and work on some of the biggest high profile and largest technology embedded projects, even working for governments and big GCs, big architecture firms, very big owners, to have a really 360 view on what happens and what the stakeholders, holdbacks are or what their drivers are. And so I started really talking to Autodesk to help them, just give some friendly advice about strategy. I met Jim Lynch, who, if you don't know Jim Lynch, who's the general manager there, he really was just one of the smartest, nicest guys I'd ever met. And I felt like he really got it. And so we just had some great conversations. And literally at one point he was like, you just got to come and help us. And I thought, well, I have my own business. And actually by that time I had another business where we were fabricating small data centers and cable landing stations, shipping them overseas. So I had this consulting business and I had this contracting, design, build, prime design, build contracting business and infrastructure. But honestly, I realized the only place I'm really going to be able to scale this and see my passion and watch an industry evolve, and actually for the good of all, for the betterment of our world, is through Autodesk. And I think as we talk more about what's going on in the industry, maybe the pieces of the puzzle will fit together as to why. I just think we're so uniquely positioned at Autodesk, aside from what we own, but the innovative culture there and just the nice people and the fact that they have such strong diversity and inclusion there, with women leadership. I've actually, funny enough, I just said to a friend, you're at a great company when the women in leadership actually are super nice to the other women in leadership as well as to the other women that work there. It's like, I've never been anywhere where the women have been so inclusive of me and so wanting to make sure that I'm in a great place, as well as the men, to be honest. But I just said, it's just such a unique place where people are focused on belonging as opposed to inclusion. So and also I think just from a business perspective, there's really nowhere else I could go that could make this happen, I think.
It's interesting because in your mind, we're going through a bit of an industrial revolution at the moment that's affecting the construction industry, but in a certain way, people are either missing it or not really aware of it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's funny. People ask me oftentimes about, is this the future? When do you think this is really going to happen? And I'm really, or what's the market for it? And I'm always so perplexed by those questions, as if, there really is a secret industrialized construction revolution that's been happening really and very strongly for the last 10 to 15 years. I just think we don't talk about it enough in the press, and we don't talk about it enough when we're teaching things, only at certain conferences, because we're sort of, we're just obsessed with the sexy, I put that in quotes, the sexy projects, where somebody's doing, high-rise volumetric boxes. And believe me, I built those. I know. We did one of the tallest modular buildings, volumetric modular buildings in the world. So I'm sort of part of the problem, and I'm solving it at the same time. Just press loves to talk about things that look like Legos, that stack like Legos, and they think that's going to be the future. And in reality, that's been happening for 100 years, and it's a sliver of the marketplace. But the industrialized construction revolution has been happening for more than 10 years, is really at the quiet level of the subcontractors that are really doing more and more single trade prefab and multi-trade subassemblies. So they're doing lots of components, single trade, and really complex multi-trade subassemblies, and even modules as well. And then you've got like these general contractors that sort of, after those guys realized they had to figure out how to start integrating this stuff. And I think we're just getting to the point in the last 5 years where owners are really asking for that and understanding that that is something they want, and they're now learning how to ask for that. And I think really, we've got some architects out there that are trying to embed some of that knowledge base in their practice. So it's funny, I see it happening every single day. And I think really, honestly, I call it the rise of the subcontractor as the new manufacturer, because they have really been slugging it out in spite of everybody else. They've been doing prefab for a long time because it makes them more productive. So
let me ask you a question here. It's interesting because you said that the owners are learning to ask for it.
Right.
So just thinking from a business development point of view, whatever part of the industry, the AEC industry that you're in, how is it you've found companies are effectively pitching prefabrication to owners to help them to understand it a little bit better?
Wow, that's a tough one. To be honest, I'm not sure anyone pitches it that well right now. I think we're struggling through that a little bit. I think there are lots of companies that have, we see that they have faith in what's happening with prefab, and they have some proof points. I think they're struggling because we're so siloed to really pitch the story in totality. But honestly, luckily, I feel like some of the biggest owners are actually asking for it, which is driving more so than people are pitching, right? So if you have these I call them serial builders in quotes, and I mean the owners that like are programmatic builder that have tons to build. So they've got, I don't know, multiple $billion data centers to build or billions of dollars worth of hospitals to build. And they just kind of looked around and thought, there has got to be a better way than every single time we do this, like it's brand new Hollywood production, like we've never built a hospital before, considering that they're programmatic builders. Most of their data centers or hospitals or high rise are kind of the same, in some way. I think the owners, the struggle they're having is they are asking for it, but we have to balance that with their collaborative. They have to start getting collaborative about reducing and removing risk. They have to be part of that conversation about removing risk, because I think people know a lot about prefab, but I don't see that many projects that often that have the entirety of the stakeholders really on board, that they all understand, they all have great expectations. It's happening more and more. So I think sometimes we pitch it as if it can be anything and do anything. And I've seen some, irresponsible expectation numbers put out there, like prefab is going to save you half the time and it's going to save you this much money. And in reality, I think what we're trying to accomplish in integrating more and more prefabrication is certainty, right?
Okay, so let's explore that a little bit. Let me just ask you this. Let's just describe for the audience in your mind, what are some of the barriers? I've heard silos so far. I've heard the owner's lack of understanding. I've heard this, the project-centric nature of the business. Describe to me some of those barriers to adoption of prefabrication in the AEC industry.
So you can really only get so far with prefab with what's happening now, which is it's sort of happening mostly at the tail end or the mid to tail end, with the subcontractors driving it as a means and methods, and general contractors trying to integrate it the best they can, right? And I think part of that is there were some specialty contractors that would have replaced their normal guys they know how to do business with, right? So for a while there, the generals were like, oh, I could use all these guys I know for many years, or I could use this manufacturer I've never met before that kind of replaces all these guys I've known for many years. Yep. And that's why that was hard, right? And I'm not saying that doesn't happen still, and it is happening where more and more, there are specialty manufacturers that have nothing to do with the subcontractor industry that are still very successful. Guys that do like prefabricated plant rooms or modular plant rooms that are really good. But they're few and far between, because, you've got this very strong relationship, territorial, symbiotic relationship between these groups. And so there was a threat that more and more general contractors would go and hire these specialty fabricators, the subcontractors realized, wait a minute, we can make those things. Or they threw them into a warehouse and made them all kind of act like manufacturers, but they weren't manufacturers, like on a job. They've all of a sudden realized, wait a minute, we could do this ourselves. And so then I think as they started getting more and more efficient at doing more and more prefab, it seemed like a real situation. When your supply chain now is embracing something, the generals could take it on. I think what we're seeing now is there is that silo between design and construction, right? And so we have to move what I call the make, which is construction and manufacturing combined. We need to move that into the design process.
Yes.
Yeah. And by the way, that doesn't mean all projects should be design assist or IPD. I don't mean that at all, actually. I think those are just Band-Aids for the fact that upfront that knowledge doesn't exist, right? It's like, I do think right now the only option we have is to possibly move that knowledge base up front so that they can tell designers and educate them as to how to utilize design for manufacturing and assembly principles. But the reason they have to be up there in person right now is that information is not institutionalized anywhere else, right?
Right. So is that on the subcontractors then to work with the architects and the engineers and really educate them as to what they're doing to integrate prefabrication and how that might affect the way that they're designing the projects up front?
So design for manufacturing and assembly are really a set of principles and design choices, right? So a lot of people use that word incorrectly. They think DFMA means prefab and prefab means DFMA, and that's actually not true, right? So if you think about manufacturing, they've been using the phrase DFMA for many years. It has a basis in an actual definition, especially overseas. They use DFMA all the time in Europe as if it's the word prefab. And so design for ease of manufacturing is a concept, right? So I'll give you a great idea about that. I was at Autodesk University this last year as a guest, and there was a precast manufacturer there talking about his panels, how he fabricates panels. And he said, I have a list of 40 instructions. He didn't know to call them design for manufacturing and assembly principles, but he said, I have these 40 instructions that if you follow all of these instructions in the design phase, I will give you a full discount in my fabrication of these panels, because they were things like, don't put a conduit box on the edge of the panel because it's the structural integrity. Don't make sure the window is only as maximum this size and this far away from the top of the panel. Lots of detailed manufacturing definition, like giving him really instructions on how to design using his prefabricated precast panel, right? And so I was like, wow, this is amazing. And by the way, if you use them all, you got the full discount. If you used only 30, he gave you a very small discount. If you use less than 30, it would cost you more than what you could do on site, right? Because he now has to change his manufacturing procedure, his line changes, his supply chain. He has to do more structural things to make it work. So that information is about one product. Now imagine first how many prefabricated elements, and especially when you talk about multi-trade, that you not only need to know the generic principles of DFMA, like you design it once, use it many times, design in for safety, things like that. But you also now need to know for every specific element, you have to first understand what the elements are and have the right terminology for them. There are structural ones and multi-trade and single trade. And then you have to move those instructions up front to the person that's designing them in some way.
So I can just hear, I can not hear, but I can imagine what a GC is thinking as they're listening to this. They're like, hey dude, I just want to build a project. I want to get it on time, on budget, so I can make some money, and I want it safely done. And hey, if my subs are going to do something fancy with prefab, it's all good. I don't care as long as they're on the job getting their thing done. And, as far as the owner is concerned, if he wants it done a certain way, I'll kind of figure it out. But as a GC, I just want to make some money here.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I always say I'm an equal opportunity offender, but the GC is actually always the number one constraint to getting prefab done at a high level.
There you go.
Just for what you just said, right? So, and I would push back and say, not many GCs, that's why they call it estimates. Not many, if you look at some of the studies that have been done, even the best projects, like there was just a study done a couple of years ago by the Lean Construction Institute on like the largest projects and ones that they categorized as best versus typical. And even the majority of the best projects are not done on time in our industry, and they're certainly not done on budget. So it's like, we have very little way to go, honestly, before we can say, like, I just want to make money. And I feel like it's like, you don't make money now. Like, so what contractors make. You could put not at the moment, but you could almost put your money in the bank and make more. And you have infinite risk as a contractor. Right. So it's like, why not have some certainty that at least in the small amount of money you're making, that if you learn how to do something that at least gives you certainty for that, without that infinite downside, and then allows you to make more money, because the more and more you can assemble concurrently on a job site, right? That's what it's all about. It's not about linear construction, piece by piece, stick by stick. The more you can decouple the more complicated bits and assemble them, not just in art, we need to learn how to assemble it in architecture, right? Like to not draw stick by stick, but to element-centric design. The more we can concurrently build things and decouple them from the job site and then land them and, put them in place in an accelerated method, you can't do anything but be better at it. So, and you will make money. But the problem is that we do things like, trade-centric estimates, and we don't know how to do, element-centric estimates, or even in Lean, like if you're doing target value design, you're doing trade-centric target value design. Yep. We teach a class called element-centric target value design. Is that all the processes, we have a lot of process entropy in the construction industry. And the days of like, look, I grew up in that business. My dad used to say, all you need is good people and take great meeting minutes. And that's how you win jobs. That's not true anymore. I'm old now. So when I was young, that's what my dad used to say. But now we have to be better. And the only way you're going to get better is to do more with less. You know what I mean? Because we don't have people on these job sites anymore that are skilled for the most part. You have, the jobs are becoming more and more complex, design wise. And so like, that's great. You'll always have contractors like that. But, I just had a contractor last week who's I think he does about $300 million. He's in a very union town, by the way, in the US. And he said, I've realized I do some prefab and I've struggled over some of it. He said, but I realize if I don't get good at this, I'm going to cease to exist on this planet as a contractor soon. Hold on a second. Hold on. I just think that's really, really important there. He said, if I don't get good at this, I'm going to cease to exist. Yep. So why do you say that? I didn't say it, he did. But in context, he's saying it because he doesn't have the labor pool with the skill set that used to exist. Yep. The margins are very thin. Yep. It's very competitive out there. The owners are asking for it more and more now. So he's got to have a skill set in understanding how to integrate these elements, right? Right. And So he's like, from a competitive advantage, and just to even stay alive, I have to. And by the way, he's already doing prefab.
So hold on then.
I have to do more.
So let me ask you this. First, we've got a vocabulary issue.
We do.
Okay. Secondly, we have a complexity issue.
Yep.
Thirdly, we have the age-old issue of silos in the industry, both from the construction side, the design side, the engineering side.
Manufacturing, everything.
Yep. I'm that GC with this industry change coming right down the track to me, towards me. I want to stay in business for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. What do I need to do to make sure that the train isn't running me over and I'm actually jumping on board the train?
So interestingly enough, we've had people in our industry talk about the McKinsey report and that we were, second to dead last in digitization in our industry, right? We don't have a high uptake in technology.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all they say. And then they don't really say why that is, right? I always say, like, one of the reasons we don't have R&D money is we put all of our R&D money in contingency, because we're so project centric. We put a tremendous amount of money in contingency that if I told you, if every company took a sliver of what they spent in contingency and moved it up front for some learning, we'd all be in a better place, right? So I think
that's all about the risk there then.
That's one of the reasons, right? Like, because we're so project centric, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing you have to do first is you've got to move your way up in the maturity stack. And the way to do that is to get off paper, right? Like, it's very hard to understand and aggregate information across one job, let alone many jobs, to see where you need to improve if you're not digitized. If you don't have a digital platform, if you don't have connected software that allows you to see how do things work from the time I estimated it to bought it out in real time, to coordinating things with the architect still, and then getting it to the job site, watching things be done and tracking it. It's really hard to do anything. By the way, I always say that's why our industry hasn't really been disrupted yet, because we're so fragmented and no one's, we don't have centralized digital processes here that it's hard for somebody to actually figure out how to disrupt us because we're not on it. And quite frankly, we need to be disrupted. We need things to change because we have, like I said, when we're thinking even our best project, like literally in that study, I was shocked that some people would have said best project ever, over budget and late, still the best project. I'm like, what? How does that happen? How did that even make the list? And by the way, it wasn't one project. It was a lot of projects. Made the list.
So just let me ask you this. Again, construction's a local business. It's a hands-on business. How do people begin to get their mindset shifted from this project-centric, bid the work, plan the work, build the work, move on to the next one? How do they do that? And like you said, move up the chain, move up the learning ladder or the sophistication ladder. Yeah. How did you put it?
I call it the maturity stack.
The maturity stack. That's an interesting thought there.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I have a whole thing about prefab readiness. Like, where are you in a level of prefab readiness? And getting digital is one of those things that's really big. I would say even more than that, the first thing you need to do, maybe even before getting digital, is you need to understand your culture and your leadership and your company. Because I'll tell you, there's a lot of big companies that have plenty of money, have a really hard time doing prefab, and it has nothing to do with the resource issue. It has everything to do with their culture, everything to do with process entropy there, everything to do with, to be honest, I call it a lot of beating on their chest and telling me that it's just fine the way we do things. I've been doing it this way for 50 years. And we pretend that doesn't exist anymore, but let me tell you, it certainly does.
No, it exists. Believe me. Yeah. I know. Yep.
So I feel like before even you spend money on software, even like getting digital or whatever you're doing, like, you really need to look at your leadership to even see if it's going to be worth it for you. Because if you don't know how to create a culture of learning and to recognize that change needs to happen. By the way, there's a great formula called Dan Miller's formula for change I've been talking about for many years. And in order to change, the first step in that formula is you have to have dissatisfaction.
Right.
So interestingly enough, the guy that just came and told me about that I will cease to exist, he was part of a small group I did something for in a city that's very unionized. I won't say which one. And it was all general contractors in this very unionized, very old school city. And I did a presentation for them. And I talked about the fact that you will cease to exist on this planet. Here's what's going on around you, not only outside of your town, but also in your town. And it was really uncomfortable for me. At the end, not a lot of the old school, and I will say men, because they were old school men in the industry, were like, not in my lifetime. By the way, I know projects in their town that have done tons of prefab, but they're like, that won't happen in my lifetime. And by the way, anytime someone says not in my lifetime, either it's already happening or it's on a 3-year horizon. Like that's it either happened already or it's going to happen imminently. So it's like I always laugh when I hear that. But out of that group, one of the gentlemen who owns a company, who by the way is in his 60s,
Right.
That's the guy that he's not a young guy. He's not the son of somebody else. He's like, I'm already doing this. I think they are not opening up their eyes to the change that's already happened, because you know why? They're very happy with their very nice boat in the harbor. They make plenty of money. Their kids went to a nice school, and they don't really like have any dissatisfaction with what they've had. So they're not really going to change. Right. And then what will happen is one day they will probably cease to exist, because, their kids probably won't understand how to evolve the business, and they didn't set them up for success by doing some of these new practices, and they won't be able to compete. But I'm not sure they care. Like maybe they're happy with the end of it if their kids go and be doctors instead of contractors, but I don't know. But he, this particular person was like, that resonated with me, not just him, several other people in the group. And they were like, I'm already doing this. I see it. If I don't change. And by the way, not a bad stance if everybody else in the room is like, we don't need to change. It's like when this guy changes, everybody else will have to change. Right. So that's a good thing. He recognized his opportunity.
So I think it's fundamental there is that the process has to begin with people in terms of the leadership of the company embracing the reality.
Yes.
And then there has to be a fundamental, I'm just picturing this massive rock that people are perpetually pushing up the hill, this rock of the silos in the industry.
Yep.
And so how do you think the industry will make progress? What do you think the industry is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years with regards to the embracing of this mindset that we've been talking about?
I think we've made some strides actually in breaking down the walls and breaking down silos. I think, again, one of the things I said about Autodesk is that they're uniquely positioned really to make this happen at scale.
Right.
So I came here because really, at Autodesk, there's software from everything from conceptual design all the way through asset management, right? So you've got everything in the design stack, everything in the digitized stack from, pre-construction with the Autodesk construction, everything. Autodesk Construction Cloud has everything for construction. And then you've got manufacturing. You've got this tremendous amount of understanding there. And because we are very siloed in our industry, I don't think many have put together the fact that I believe, and Autodesk believes, that we need to enable and empower this industry, right? And that's why I came here, right? So I wouldn't have come here if that wasn't how they felt, that we really do need to make things like that contractor. I owe it to him to make it easier for him to do prefabrication if he will cease to exist if he doesn't, right? And by the way, it's not just him. I've had the same conversation with architects. Architects have come. There are several large architecture firms. At one point, one of them wanted to buy Xsite. And I thought, that's interesting. An architecture firm wants to buy us. And the reason that happens is they're all struggling within their own silo and trying to figure out how to do this better. And so there needs to be, some initiatives that work like with architects by themselves, but some they need to cross over to construction, and some even by the way, I just had a very large manufacturer of pieces of equipment ask me what the right DFMA principles were for their product and how do they get that upfront to understand that it would enable other prefabrication. That never used to happen. I never got emails like that, but now people are starting to cross over. So I really came because there really needs to be a connected, sort of a digital bridge that supports this with what people are doing in the industry. We have to enable people and empower them to do more with less now, right? So
what you're saying then, in your mind, is one of the ways to overcome the industry silos and the silos that actually exist within every single construction company is through, one of the key drivers is through a package like Autodesk, which can bridge those gaps within companies and between companies across the whole construction process.
Exactly. The design and construction and manufacturing process, right? And I want to make sure we keep saying that because we already have products that, can already do that. We're doing that in the Autodesk Construction Cloud that connect everything from pre-con to, completion. But I think because things have been quite siloed in the world, we have to start enabling it across from, we are already doing this with design through construction, manufacturing, but we need to really ramp it up and do it more. And I think because there's a need for that, like I think COVID is a great example of why that's happening. And some of the results of that are more evident when something like this happens in COVID, why it's so necessary and how the heavy lifting work that Autodesk has been doing for many years is really coming to fruition to make those connections across the industry. So I think that's important too.
I think it's interesting though, because software, the various players in the software field in construction, it seems like a picture construction is this big ball, and you've got all these sort of software guys and gals kind of going whoomph on the ball, and it's like all kind of messy, and slowly over time, people are figuring out what actually works and what's hype. and what's actually going to help me to build a project safer and quicker and make more money. And it seems like one thing that Autodesk is doing with their purchases of folks like PlanGrid is taking the best solutions that are out there with a view to really helping with this overcoming of the silos that we're talking about.
Right. And you know what's great about that? You know, it's not a product that solves it. I hate to say that, even though
it isn't. I know that's
I believe we bought the best products. That's your point, right? I do think like Building Connected is amazing and
Sure.
PlanGrid is amazing. I mean, my ex-husband's on a job right now, 2 hospital builds, and he said, I'd be dead without PlanGrid. You know, like he's like, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. Or BIM 360, collaborating with BIM 360. He's like, I would be in the middle of these patient rooms if I didn't have BIM 360 right now, thank God. So I think we've looked at this differently to understand that it's never going to be about one product, right? It's about what that contractor said to me, that I will cease to exist unless I can fully embrace this entirety of the process, right?
Right.
And I think that's important for everyone to recognize. Now, it's funny, why buy? I kind of said this early on when I first started working at Autodesk. It's like, why buy the Autodesk Construction Cloud versus something else, right? So, okay, there are plenty of things out there that I think do some of the similar things that the Construction Cloud does. And you know that's true. I mean, I don't sell software, so that's a good thing. I can say whatever I kind of want, and that's the case. But I happen to think there are other products out there that you put together. They could equal potentially some of the parts of the Construction Cloud. But that's not the gist of this, right? It's the fact is, one day, and even now, you can already with the Autodesk Construction Cloud connect it through the design process all the way to the end. It's not about, it's about process more than it is about product, right? And this is teaching and embedding that a little bit more of that transformational process of IC and prefabrication into the process in totality, right? So it's like at some point, no one really is going to care about one little piece of the software within this whole connected process, because the process is far more valuable than any piece of software, to be honest. Like, I believe. Now, I don't sell software, so maybe that's, you know, personally. But I think I came to Autodesk because we have aside from having the best software, we have the most in the stack. And I also think we have great innovative clients. Like, we have an amazing consulting division here that I get to work now with some of the greatest companies in the world to help them on their IC strategy. And they're already, you know, my consulting business was always about the process. It never had the backbone technology stack underneath it. I was agnostic to that, honestly. But now I can actually really make it so much more robust by having a technology stack that attaches to it, regardless of whose it is. And I think that's what's really important, that I believe, you know, and by the way, I had to assess the company before I came on all the things I just said about that GC. Did it have the right culture? Did it have the right leadership? Was I going to be able to do what I really think is necessary to get, did they have process entropy that I couldn't break down? And for me, really, and I looked across the industry when I thought about moving, and I was like, this is the place to go. Luckily for me, and this is going to sound crazy, COVID happened right after I got here, honestly. And like coming over here and the choice I made to come, I came because I believed all those things. And when I came and talked to people before I would come, but then to have it validated right after, to know like, wow, this leadership really does care. They do care about their clients. They do care about their employees. Like, they just did a unprecedented, they ended up giving all the employees that didn't have stock in their packages stock in Autodesk during COVID, because they want them all to be owners. They had doubled like their capacity to give donations through their employees during this time. They basically, I mean, literally the leadership came to me. I had capacity when it happened, so I was on all these task forces, and leadership just said to me, Amy, go help whoever needs help with prefabrication for these hospitals. Don't ask for credit. Don't even, it doesn't matter. Just go help people. And I'm like, who does that? What company actually? I mean, I knew they told me that when I met them, but then to see the 100-year event happen and watch people put their, you know, they walk the walk. They don't just talk it. And that was, for me, honestly, I'm even more excited about the premise of being able to, you know, really transform the industry now that I'm validated that I'm in the right place.
It's interesting because I think that it seems that Autodesk has a particular thesis as they're approaching the market. There's this fundamental understanding that they're trying to transform the construction industry.
No, that's probably the wrong way to say it, because that implies that they're in control, right? Like, no, transform is like, I think
that's why I think it's challenging, because, you know, they have a perspective. You guys have a perspective. Right. I just coming from an outsider who's worked with guys and gals in the construction industry for 15 years. This is a heavy lift. It's a very heavy lift.
That's why it hasn't been done before.
Right.
And like, Hey, we talked about this before. I played competitive rugby for 15 years. I'm
Yep.
tougher than I look, just for the record. So I'm ready for that and the heavy lift. And it's not just me. Luckily, I have great people that have an unbelievable amount of knowledge behind me at the industry level at Autodesk, and also all of my friends in the industry that have helped, because this is not an Autodesk thing.
Yeah, right.
Everyone in the industry is calling for this. And so it's less about us transforming the industry, quite frankly. Like, the greatest thing about working at Autodesk is I don't have to convince anybody to buy software. Like, everybody already uses our software, right?
Yeah,
It's
right.
like everybody already designs with Revit or AutoCAD or uses the Autodesk Construction Cloud. It's not like I have to go and convince them first to switch a product and then convince them to change their process.
So let me ask you this. Let's say I'm a GC. I'm a local GC. Let's say I'm doing 100 mil a year, right?
Yep.
Things are going pretty good, but I do see that train coming down the track, right?
Yep.
Where do I need to go to begin to get some resources to help sort of renew me in my mind and begin to feel comfortable with this vocabulary, comfortable with the perspectives and the shifts that are happening? Where do I need to go?
Yeah. Well, these days, the greatest thing ever is that all you have to do is turn your laptop on. I mean, the webinars that are going out all over. I mean, I'm on 5 webinars a week talking about how to, level set on language and talking about the industry and what you need to do. I think, before COVID, obviously there are webinars, but I mean, Connect and Construct is a show that I had never actually been to Autodesk University before last year. I was overwhelmed by the amount of information that it was so amazing. They have this whole Connect and Construct show prior, which I'll be taking a big part in for Industrialized Construction this upcoming year. But then Autodesk University had just amazing stories about IC and what's going on in robotics. There's Industrialized Construction, and under that is DFMA and as an enabler, and prefabrication as a tool, but there's also like robotics and automation and additive manufacturing and 3D printing, and there's things like lean manufacturing, all that stuff. You can go and learn about that at AU, as well as, like, I'm the ambassador for a show called Advancing Prefab. It's mostly subs. It last year had 900 people almost, and it started 4 years ago. We had 200 people coming.
So we got Connect and Construct.
Connect and Construct.
What was the other one that you just said?
Advancing Prefabrication is a great show that I'm the ambassador for. That happens once a year.
Advancing Prefabrication.
Yep.
Yep.
And then again, like, I know this is going to sound strange because I'm really an evangelist for the technology and the methodology more than anything else.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, I'm on LinkedIn every single day. If you link in with me, pointing to like stories about stuff and resources for things, and catch this webinar, it's going to be great. And look at these. And because I'm agnostic, honestly, even though I work at Autodesk, they want me to be agnostic, right? So they've never wanted me to just like drink the Kool-Aid and they hired me. And it's funny, I actually said to the CEO when we first met, I'm like, listen, I just need to let I have to be my authentic self wherever I go. And he said, no problem. That's what we want. And I was like, okay, remember you said that. And he was like, no. We want you to be your authentic self. And my authentic self is I'm a challenger by nature, right?
Right.
I want things to be better. I'm into lean. I'm into continuous improvement. I just changed something in my PowerPoint education deck today, actually, that I've been saying for 10 years because somebody said, I think it would be better like this. And I said, you know what? You're right. It would be better. He said, how married are you to that? And I said, you know what? Not so much, because if it's better, I'll take it. You know what I mean? So I think right now there are tons of resources. I mean, I speak at the Lean Construction Institute a lot. I'm at, design build conferences. I spoke last year at the Mechanical Contractors Association, and I do a lot of stuff with specialty trade contractors.
Which Mechanical Contractors Association?
The National. I spoke at the MCA National.
Yeah. I spoke at SMACNA last year.
Oh, did you? And then, I'm also, by the way, that's just the US. I do a lot in Australia. I know this is mostly, I'm not sure how international your listenership is, but I think 40% of my following is from Australia. I used to do a show there all the time, and I'm going there in October to speak for their version of the MCAA. That's the AMCA. Just did a webinar with them.
Let me ask you, do you know Angie Simon? She's the president of SMACNA.
I think we just connected recently.
You would love her. You guys would get along like a house on fire.
That.
She's a totally awesome man. She kicks butt. She's the first female president of SMACNA.
I think we just connected.
Yeah. She is the CEO of Western Allied Mechanical out of the Bay Area. She's awesome.
I think we just connected. And it's funny. And then in Asia, like, I'm always in Asia doing a couple shows because I worked for the Building Construction Authority in Singapore for several years. And by the way, if you want to learn about stuff going on, Singapore is like the Silicon Valley of DFMA prefabrication. By the country that you can't actually get a building permit anymore unless you're doing prefabrication and you're utilizing BIM. So they're incentivizing contractors and stuff. It's great.
So there's another point, right? That you just hit on that. Let's just wrap it up with that,
Sure.
because the question that I'm always thinking is, who's going to drive this? And is it the owners? Is it the subs? Is it the GCs? Is it everybody? But then you just brought in the 800-pound gorilla, the government. So talk about that a little bit. How do you think the government comes into play here, both locally, statewide, and federally, in terms of driving prefabrication?
Look, right now we have such an amazing opportunity for government to really further this industry. And here's how. I sit back sometimes and I watch certain states. I won't say which. I live in New Jersey, by the way, but I watch certain states and I hear them give out monies from their state and say, we're going to give you the money for this project, but you got to hire locally.
Right.
And I'm like, is that good enough? I don't think it is. Or stimulus money that, is mostly looking at what they call infrastructure. And I think what we've learned here now at COVID-19 is that infrastructure doesn't just mean roads. Like we need hospital beds right now. We need, the last mile for the digital infrastructure is probably the most critical infrastructure we need at the moment, right? You've got not just kids that can't actually get on the internet for school and families that can't communicate, but you've got small businesses, which in our industry, we're mostly small and medium-sized businesses that actually didn't have the ability to go digital during this time, that weren't able to collaborate and be safe on job sites because they didn't have that ability, right? So now while we're giving out all this stimulus money, we should be asking for a few things with, that money where it goes. We should require the use of things like BIM and, digital collaboration tools. And we should be requiring the fact that they get some innovation points by utilizing some prefabrication. Because if you put people in think about this, if you're government and you said you got to use my local people, you've basically just said you've got to hire contractors and get them out on a job site. But if you say, listen, we're going to give you this money, and part of that is you have to set up this factory and you're going to employ people in this factory. A factory is different than putting them on a project, right? It's more project-centric thinking. A factory is programmatic, right? So You're setting up a factory, you're creating jobs that are inside. Typically, you can co-locate daycare near it. So you've got women that can go and work there, and non-traditional, or whoever takes care of daycare, not just women, but you can have young people that are embedding technology into that factory. You've got Helmets to Hard Hats program that love to get involved in that. You also even have people that are coming out of jail that want to have jobs, and we can rehabilitate them. You get this really great microcosm that not only can you build in your community from the people that live there, but you can export work from your community to other places because it transfers, right? And we just get this really great living, learning culture. We start creating an ecosystem. And by the way, I think the ecosystem is changing already in AEC. It's the current people we have now are participating and really going along in this ecosystem of IC. But the government can move that so much further, so much faster. All they have to do is look at places like Singapore or the UK or China, where they've demanded the use of this because they have more constraints than we do, right? So we're in the United States, we have less constraints. But I think also the other reason is they just think 10, 15 years ago. I just had somebody recently say to me, I don't know if we should talk about prefab because, the trade contractors will get very upset. And I said, why? They're the ones doing all the prefab. They want the guys that have invested in their fab shops want you to say that. Why do you think they put that money into their fab shops? This is where it really pays off for them. It's the reason why during this, compared to Sandy, you've seen more subcontractors and general contractors have solutions for hospitals and less of the tent structure, containerized, the stuff that kind of comes out of I would say the lower end rapidly deployable stuff, because these contractors were able to pivot and do something quickly because they had fab shops, because they were digitized, they could collaborate online, right? It's that's why Louis Vuitton could make ventilators very quickly and pivot. And in construction, most of us that aren't digitized look around like we can't do it. We can't go on the job site. We can't do anything. But the guys that were able to pivot are the guys that were already on this journey that are part of this IC ecosystem.
So that's interesting to think about how COVID could really provide a catalyst going forward for the adoption of more of these prefabrication methods and means, simply because people are seeing how effectively it works.
I can't even tell you the letters that come in every single day. And probably Autodesk is too humble to say this outright, but I will because I'm new. Every day I'm on an internal message board where I see letters from contractors and architects talking about how things like BIM 360 allow them to stay home and work, or that they would never be able. There was a letter from India. They would never be able to continue building this airport if they didn't have our software. Every day, at least 10 times a day, I see something come through that this is keeping people safe, but it's also making them more productive, and they were able to pivot instantaneously without any issue. So it's okay, you're the government now. You want to create resiliency within your your communities, your economy, this is it. You're about to give out billions of dollars. Why would you do that without any sort of caveat that we spend it more wisely, right? For what we're doing.
So let me ask you this, just as we wrap up, because I mean, I can tell we could just go on for hours here, which is awesome. I'm really enjoying the conversation. What are some actions that a general contractor or a subcontractor could take to become less project-centered or project-centric and become more part of this ecosystem that you've been describing here in the last hour or so?
Well, I definitely think your leadership has to open up your mind and start seeing the possibilities, right? So you might be dissatisfied. The next step in that formula is to have a vision. You need to have vision, right?
Yep.
So the way that formula works is you need to have dissatisfaction, then you need to have a vision. In order to do that, you have to stop, you have to open up your eyes, and you got to look around. You got to see what's happening, what's possible. I've actually had contractors say, I've shown them pictures. I was at a job consulting once, and I showed him pictures of all this prefab going on. And the guy actually said to me, I know that stuff happens in Europe, but it doesn't happen here. And I said, I just want to let you know. I said, every one of those pictures is from one of your competitors in this city. And he said, what? And I said, absolutely, that's the job up the street. So you have to have a vision. So you have to stop. And right now we have a moment. We should stop and look around.
Yep.
And then you have to have some first concrete steps of action.
Yep.
One of those is you've got to get digital. The second one is you've got to get educated. And by the way, you will find most people know that if you text me on LinkedIn or you text me on my phone, I always respond to everybody, students, CEOs, big owners, it doesn't matter. I want everyone to get on the journey. This is my passion. I don't have a bucket list, I always say. It's just this. My daughter who's 11 and that's all I got. Right? So I think you have to then have some concrete steps of action. And by the way, all three of those together, will help you they have to be greater than resistance, right? Yep. So you have to know that. So if you look at that formula, funny enough, that's what it says. And I will help you. Trust me. Like I said, I'm a rugby player and a mom, by the way, which makes me tough. So I can help you overcome some of that resistance. And a lot of it's just by collaborating and learning and seeing, opening up your eyes to see what's happening without you, maybe.
So in other words,
funny enough, most contractors think they don't do prefab, and then I get a bunch of their subs in the room, and all I have to do is introduce myself, and they start telling me all the prefab they do on these guys on their jobs already. But that general contractor just needs to start enabling it so they can optimize, right? It's like it's not enough just to have it. You have to learn how to optimize the integration, and that's what's going to get you really far.
So I really like that, the dissatisfaction. And so if you're a general contractor or a sub and you're dissatisfied with your profits or the way things are running, then you need to think about this, followed by vision. And from what you're telling me, there's plenty of people who have caught the vision. You just need to get yourself in relationships with them so that you can, get a little bit of that vision yourself.
Yes.
And then those concrete first steps, one is being digitized and the other one is getting educated.
Yes.
And all of those have to be greater than the resistance that you feel because perhaps you're uncomfortable with the technology or you don't understand it or you just like the sort of the lane that you're in.
Look, at the end of the day, nobody does anything for the first time, especially when, if you had to do it alone, you could probably do it well enough. But this is learning something new, which is a process that crosses over many different stakeholders in the industry at one time. And so just recognize that you're not going to do it for the first time and be amazing at it. You have to recognize that you will have a learning curve that is you're going to not do it as well first, and then you're going to get transformationally better than what you're doing now.
Yes.
So I think be prepared for that. You're going to have to spend some time, effort, and money to learn and practice and get enough of it going so that you can really because look, projects take a really long time in our industry. You can't dip your toe in and think 4 years later, you're let's see if that was good enough. You can't. You can't. So it's like putting any piece of equipment in your fab shop. The first day I'll say any kind of robotics, your guys that do that by hand are laughing at you because you can't even put the software, you can't get the software to even work on the first day, right? But by the time you get it working, you do your first little piece, they're still laughing at you until a month later when all of a sudden transformationally you can blow away the productivity with your, piece of robotics versus when you're so project centric, we have very little tolerance for the setting up of the software and getting to the one piece. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yep. I know what you mean.
We have to get some thicker skin and spend some money in this, right? And we've got to get past that barrier,
Right.
That's where you have to kick in your R&D tax credits up front, hook up with that. I tell you, man, I got another episode on Construction Genius about R&D tax credits. This is exactly how you should be using that.
All the time. If you don't have a fab shop, you were not using them at all, right? So that's the thing. You got to look, I think the other barrier we have when we say education is we talk about becoming manufacturers in this industry. And I feel like everyone shakes their head at me like, yeah, we got to be safer, more productive. We got to be like manufacturers. And I feel like then they walk out of the room and they're like, what's a manufacturer?
Yeah, right.
You know, and I'm like, okay, guess what? There's lots of people out there that know what manufacturing is and can help you apply that to your construction business. And we're not making cars here. These are buildings. There are lots of people that understand the complexities of construction that also know manufacturing and automation and things like that help you get on your path and that can help you get digitized. And you know what I mean? We're all not just a bunch of car manufacturers telling you to do things like us. Those days are way over. Right?
That's excellent. Well, Amy, as we wrap up here, I'm just so that everyone knows there's going to be links in the show notes to a variety of these resources that we talked about. But I do like to ask my guests this. Amy, you're out there in New Jersey. Can you give us a restaurant recommendation? If we're going to be visiting you out there in New Jersey or maybe in the greater New York City area, what's your favorite place to go eat?
I like Wolfgang's in Somerville. They have a great 2-person porterhouse steak for $2.
That sounds awesome.
It's pretty good. I'm a steak girl. I eat keto, so I love steak. So I would go there.
How do you like your steaks?
I'm like a medium rare girl.
Yes.
So I like it a little bit on the rare side.
There you go. Awesome.
I'm easy to share with. I don't eat that much, and I like it usually the way I'm the girl at the table always that wants to share. So if you want to share with me, that's great.
All right. So it's Wolfgang's, and where's that?
In Somerville. I should call it that's a chain, but I should call it a local. Juniper Hill in Clinton is like, if you want to support local, Juniper Hill does a lot of cool farm to table in my cute little town, Clinton, New Jersey.
Okay. Juniper Hill in Clinton, New Jersey.
Hit them up. We've got a beautiful town.
Awesome. Amy, you've been very generous with your time and your insights here. I really appreciate it. I know the listeners have really benefited from what you have to share. And
awesome.
I look forward to connecting with you down the road here.
Anytime. Thanks, guys. Reach out.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity, and to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.